Imagine that you run into a Bai Sahib or you run into a Socrates. Socrates has already been cleansed by, his teacher. He's been contaminated by love, consumed by love, and on a daily basis is inspired by love. And once, you are touched by this thing that Socrates has, you could consider it to be agape. You don't really want, or you can't really care too much for your family life. You can't really care for too much for political life, for a life that contains physical power. You're all spirit and very little of meat. He's a teacher filled with love and wisdom. He is a true philosopher. But it's no good being a teacher, but not having a student, just this overflowing of water, but there is no container to receive it. Eventually it'll just go bad. And, Plato sees him. And let's just say Plato and Socrates were part of the same body. And Zeus cut this human being. One became a Socrates, one became a Plato. Socrates realized what had happened to him. But Plato only has a very dim idea. He's really in the dark. And what takes place for the next few years is that there is this grinding process. Socrates knows that Plato has taken the bait. But Plato is going to struggle like any good fish. Any sensible fish is going to struggle. It's going to be filled with doubt, with fear, with anxiety, because they won't kind of release from the bait, they want to go back to their life. And the picture Aristophanes gives us is that for the next few years, these two halves need to grind. Of course, in terms of Aristophanes, both halves have a lot of rough edges. That's not the case, at least in our version with Socrates. Socrates has no rough edges, but Plato does, even though they have come from the same body. But because Plato was tossed into a different area, different parents, different desires, different temperament, he's not going to receive Socrates well just yet. He's interested, but that doesn't mean anything. So there's a good amount of back and forth, and it's going to take place for a long, long time. So you have this, very infantile stage where the student exists, which is, I have heard someone speak, I have looked at his face, I have seen his eyes, and something about me just has come to life. I don't know what it is, but I just want to be around him. Okay, well, that's like an infant. You're just sitting. You're no longer laying. You can kind of just sit on the ground without falling backwards. The next problem is, you have a teacher who's like 70. You have a student who is 30 or 20. I mean, there is no way as, a 20-year-old will never be able to understand what, his or her parents have gone through to raise him. It is impossible for a 20-year-old to claim that they understand what the teacher is talking about. Now, that doesn't mean that the student will not have feelings, emotions, intuitions. You want to call those, invisible kind of wisdom being shared, you can. But it doesn't lead the students anywhere except to despair and confusion, and conflict, because, a good portion of the student is still a lot of meat. It's physical. The student goes there in hopes of understanding what the teacher is saying with the same old intellect. What you have is a body, a human being, who's just interested. Why, how, when, who, he doesn't know, she doesn't know. They're just interested. There is this last line in the first story of the Masnavi, which is about the reed flute. Aina dani chera qammaz neest. That, do you know why your mirror is not clear? It's because the dust has not been removed from it. I'm sure you can find a mirror in your garage somewhere, that has been sitting and collecting dust for the past many years. Imagine now you are the teacher, the mirror is the student. And what is it that every teacher desires? Every teacher desires to see their own reflection. That's what every teacher desires. When Johnny goes in the classroom and talks about what it means to be homosexual in America, he wants to see minds and faces and eyes light up. And then there is intimacy. For that moment there is understanding. But just because the student understands, it doesn't mean that they know what it means to live in the South. They know what it means to have a very devout Christian mother. They don't understand the conflict that a young man has to go through. Should I come out today? Should I come out tomorrow? Should I tell my mom this way or should I tell her that way? Should they be completely honest or should I kind of just play in the gray area? The student just understands for a nanosecond and then the gate shuts. Now, all students, I think, are like mirrors that have been in the garage for decades. The only thing initially any good teacher can do is to remind a mirror that yes, you have dust, and there is the possibility of removing the dust. It's just going to be very difficult. If you happen to be a young teacher again, they'll go to Home Depot, they'll buy lots of towels, they'll buy lots of like window or glass cleaner. They'll come back with a van filled with all this nonsense. And the moment the mirror kind of sees all the stuff coming out, looks at the teacher and says, I'm really thankful that you've gone to Home Depot and you've bought all the stuff. I have to go to the class right now. I'll be back. You'll be back? Yeah, I'll be back. There is a gathering. I have this party to go to. I promised my friends. What party? What friends? What are you, an idiot? Because in some ways the student has become addicted to all the dust. They're okay with not being so reflective. They're okay feeling a little heavy, and they're okay with like hanging out with other mirrors that have like an inch of dust on them. But there is this very dim and vague connection that they feel towards a mirror that has some clarity. And so you kind of begin to spray the glass or the mirror, and you have no idea how the student is going to react. And perhaps we should say student to be is going to react. Is he going to stay? Is she going to run away? How loud is going to be their scream? Is the teacher young enough and patient enough to go slowly section by section using towels that are made out of silk? Or is it going to be someone who's using like a wire scrubber? I remember there were these moments with Hussein. He was still a very young man, but you could kind of see the wear and tear of once in a while of working at his shop that had nothing to do with his passions. You would have customers who were talking about politics and religion, and in Hussein's estimation, they were all idiots. Then you would come home exhausted, and now here we are, the three or the four of us sitting asking him questions, and he kind of says a few things, and one of us says something, and he kind of says, "Oh, this is such a waste of time." And all of a sudden, he kind of just comes at you like a bulldozer. He embarrasses you, not because he wants to, but he just kind of loses his patience, and rightly so. Again, if you kind of liken the mirror and the glass has a lot of dust on it, and the cleaner as the teacher, and the mirror as a student, first you have no idea how the student is going to react. And you don't even know why the student is there. And one of the best books that talks about this is, I think it's called The Hermits or Hermits. It's like this guy has been a monk, or even the Christian Desert Fathers in Philokalia. They've been living in caves for like 50 years, and they've had all these beautiful experiences, and they are filled with wisdom. And by wisdom, I mean they really understand not only the physical life, they also understand, maybe to some extent, the spiritual life. And so they kind of come out and they say, I am going to share my wisdom with the people of my town. And so a woman goes to the sage, it's like going to Jesus Christ, and Jesus kind of says, yes, they're here because they want to know about God, or truth, or wisdom, or the spiritual path. And the woman says, Master, yes, my husband and I had a fight. How can I resolve conflicts with my husband? What can the poor guy say? He's going to look at you, the young Jesus, who's going to say, oh, forgive him, turn the other cheek. The Jesus who's not so patient will say, whatever you store down here will be stolen by thieves. You will gain the acceptance of your husband, but your husband is an idiot, which means an idiot has accepted you. And in being accepted by an idiot, you reject being accepted by wisdom, by truth, by honesty. So the young Jesus gives the woman hope. The older Jesus, the more wise and impatient, who's much more aware about his capacity, about his time, about his energy, about his youth, kind of looks at this woman and says, listen, my parents at the age of 12, do you know what that means? I went into the desert for 18 years. Do you know what the hell that means? I came back to tell you how to live life, all of life, not with your ridiculous husband. Your marriage is stupid. And you're here asking me how to resolve conflict with your mom, with your dad, with your boyfriend? Are you kidding? I'm gonna waste my time with you. And that's what this book is all about. That's what, Philokalia is all about. People with a good amount of wisdom being approached by ridiculous people with infantile questions. Now, from far away, you and I see these people traveling to see a sage. And we say, this is a student with a good amount of devotion. But you have no idea once the student gets there what their intentions are, why they are there. Especially in the year 2022, it's fashionable to think spiritually, to talk spiritually. And if you consider that all mirrors, all human beings, we are profoundly attached to the dust that we have been collecting over the past many, many years. First, because that's just the sort of creatures we are. Second, because for 20 years you've been angry at your father, at your boyfriend, at your ex, at your kids. If you get rid of the anger, what the hell are you gonna do? All the books you read is about anger. All the friends you have, you guys talk about anger. All the workshops you go to, about anger. You go jogging because of anger. Everything you do is about goddamn anger. And now you say, I want to get a workshop. Go to a workshop that says you will no longer be angry after a month. Okay, so good for you. Now you're not angry. What are you going to do with all the contact people on your cell phone? What are you going to do with all these books? And I think all those things are there to kind of demonstrate to us how difficult a time teachers have, how enormously a difficult thing it is to be a student. Because, in as much as I say all these nasty things about students, it's really, really difficult because intuitively you gravitate towards Jesus Christ, towards a Gurjeev. But, physical life is demanding. You may want to go into the classroom and be a Socrates, but you don't want to lose your job. You don't want to go to your dean and say, well, what makes you a dean? Just because you know a few buzzwords that makes you a dean? Do you really think this is called education? You can take things to some extent far, but there comes a point where you say, rent, family. And it's kind of like if you've seen The Third Godfather, where Al Pacino is in the kitchen and he says, every time I want to leave the mob life, they pull me back. And then he has a heart attack or a stroke. And it's true. I think every time you run into a teacher, you read a good book and you're inspired, you watch a clip on YouTube and you're inspired, you watch a movie, you're inspired, and you want to kind of drastically change your life, don't underestimate your past, don't underestimate your habits, your addictions, and really just the demands and the responsibilities of the physical life. They're just way, way, way too much. And there's a reason, I think, why, especially in the Sufi tradition, in Hindu tradition, why love plays such an important role. Because it's the only thing that has the power to burn away habits, burn away your passion for physical life. And it's, we have all experienced when you fall in love with someone. You want to sleep but you can't. You want to eat but you can't. And that is what love does. And that's what, I think that's the only really component that can get rid of your desire to walk back into a safe environment. It won't let you. You become like this fourth moth where you want to say, I want to be consumed by fire. I'm going to wait here day after day after day until he calls. It's the only component that will help you kind of just submit and surrender yourself to supposedly a teacher that has a scrubber will constantly, and it's not like dust, it's like oil and asphalt stuck to you. I mean, that's what memories do. Imagine you fell in love at the age of 18, things didn't work out, you're now 35, and every time you want to fall in love with someone, well, fear overcomes you and you kind of take 2 steps forward and 20 back. That's not dust, that's like concrete. If a good teacher wants to see his or her own reflection inside you, well, that piece of you that has concrete needs to go. And you can't just scrub the concrete away, it needs to be jackhammered. It's painful, it's agonizing. And there are not very many people out there who can endure that. I think the younger you are, the easier it is to kind of just suffer the pain of a jackhammer inside your soul. The older you are, the more difficult for, just biological reasons. Your body can't take it. And if you're an older student working with someone like Bhai Sahib, where he has to kind of just bulldoze himself through all the garbage to get inside you, let's say you will graduate, you won't go to college, you won't go to university, you will never get to a place where Bhai Sahib can see his own reflection. The other thing is, imagine you like someone and you have invited them for dinner, and the first thing you ask them is, so what's your favorite food? And they say, I like spaghetti. Now you yourself may not like spaghetti, but because you like them and you want to please them, you make spaghetti. So you go shopping, you put the bags on the counter, you clean your house, you make the spaghetti, you wash the dishes, clean the counter, you cut the flowers, put them in a bucket on the table, you light some candles, you play some classical music in the background, there is a knock. And this guy or gal walk in, and you have created this physical environment that is profoundly powerful, and it impacts this man's psychology. He comes in very respectfully, maybe not so respectfully. He doesn't know if he should sit and eat or he should just hold your hand and take you to the bedroom. That's what the physical environment does. That's what you're doing. You want him to become attracted to you, and the way you do it is you create the physical conditions. Now, it's true that perhaps he has a girlfriend that you didn't know, or he has an ex, he's been going back and forth, and happens to be very agitated. She's the one who left him. He didn't really want to leave. He's still kind of stuck on her. And he comes to your house, and it's a beautiful setting. But the truth is, his mind and his heart and his soul is somewhere else. And because he's somewhere else, it doesn't matter what you have created. It's just not going to have the impact that you want. So what you have is, whether it's Jesus or the Buddha or Gurdjieff or Muhammad, what all these people have in common is that they create a physical environment. And it doesn't have to do anything with perhaps 4 walls. It could be they themselves. When someone like Jesus during the Last Supper says, eat this bread, it is my body, he is creating a physical environment filled with symbols, and they are potent and they are powerful. That every time you sit and eat bread with friends of your soul, and when you're sitting and eating, that's what you should think. That's what a symbol does. It impacts your psychology. It kind of gives birth to a very unique set of emotions and then thoughts, and then they all come together. Eventually you become paralyzed. If you're a Christian, you're kind of be forced into this prayer mode filled with humility and repentance and poverty, and then you just weep. And then maybe you'll just pass out, maybe you'll have a dream, maybe you'll have an experience, who knows? That those things are not in our hands. But the point is, all that teachers can do really is create the physical environment that will impact not only the way you sit, but also the way you begin to feel. It also begins to impact your brain chemistry, where if you were thinking about money for the body, now you think about money of your soul. Where can I go and get such kind of money, such nourishments? Once this environment is created, the truth is the rest is up to the student. You have to do the work. And your main work doesn't involve the presence of the teacher. Your main work is when you're away from the teacher. Can you keep his or her image with you? Can you, because if you have the image of Jesus inside your head, and if that image gives birth to a good amount of intense emotions, i.e., love, the way you walk will have a different quality to it. The way you feel when you walk into the classroom, the way you talk to students, when someone emails you and says, I missed an assignment, what can I do? Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. And as long as you have that image in your head, then you can kind of become somewhat mindful and aware. There is this Hush dar dam, nazar bar qadam. There are 8 steps in the Naqshbandi order. Hush dar dam means always be aware of your breath. It is true that without it you'll die, but it becomes symbolic. But you need to have a relatively religious and spiritual background, a culture, a society, your parents, you've read the Bible or the Quran a little bit, where the breath symbolizes there is this dust, there is God grabbing this dust, breathing into it, and all of a sudden this dust comes to life, and God looks at this and says, go out there, the physical world is your dominion, you have power over everything, but remember, you have my spirit inside you. Let my spirit baptize you. And if my spirit can baptize your flesh, the physical world will remain safe. And so what you have is hush dar dam. Now, you have to be in the physical presence of a really, really awesome teacher, where he sits or she sits and they're very focused. Breath doesn't just mean like breathing in and out, because every breath could be your last breath. That the teacher needs to be aware of his or her own mortality. And that gives value to time, that gives value to breath, that gives value to purpose, intentions. Nazar bar qadam. Qadam means step, nazar means being aware. Know where you are, know where you're going, know what you're doing. And these are exotic concepts. They really, really, really are. And when you are sitting in a room, say, if you belong to a cult and you worship a teacher, whenever you're around him, those 8 steps are present. It's like the Eightfold Path in Buddhism. You're not going to cheat, you're not going to lie, you're not going to gossip. If the Buddha is sitting there, who dares to talk about their boyfriend or girlfriend? No one does that, because he just has a very powerful presence. The trick, if you are a mirror filled with concrete and glue and dust and bubble gum stuck on you for a long, long time, you really need to kind of just be around this person. It's very much like becoming addicted to, say, porn or drugs or alcohol or walking or biking. You have to become addicted to this person. One of the nice things about becoming addicted to someone like a Jesus or a Gurdjieff is that you always long for them. And you long for them because they have something within. You may not know what it is, but it inspires you to be a bit more reflective, to be a bit more thoughtful, to live a life that's perhaps can have a bit more of a worth. There is no such thing as a teacher passing on his or her wisdom to a student. What usually happens is there is this mutual attraction. The teacher never runs after the student. It's the student's desire that propels him or pushes him or her to go and be with this teacher day after day after day after day, until the student comes to realize, and perhaps the teacher comes to realize too, that there is enough of Gurdjieff that now lives inside J.G. Bennett. J.G. Bennett no longer needs to go to Gurdjieff. There is enough anxiety and frustration and fear and love and passion and curiosity about the spiritual path. The presence or absence of Gurdjieff makes no difference. But that's J.G. Bennett, and that's a man, and that's about almost 100 years ago. Completely different times. And to some extent, times creates people who have different qualities. I don't have the patience of my father, nor do I have the patience of my mother, because they came from a different generation. They didn't have car, they didn't have running water, they didn't have electricity. They didn't have the privileges we do today. The difficult part really is the student has to sit and has to protect whatever it is that the teacher has planted inside them. And if you don't love, you'll easily be distracted. It doesn't matter, if you go somewhere once or twice a week for 500,000 years. If there is no love, what you have is distraction. Curiosity doesn't do anything. Interest means nothing. It is only love that creates monogamy. It is only love that creates passivity. It's only love that creates submission and surrender. There is this beautiful passage in the Quran where Muhammad goes to God and he's like screaming. I don't know if he is, but it's nice to make these things rather dramatic. He's like in the cave, he's crying and the tears are just rolling off of his face and beard, and he's screaming, saying, Angel Gabriel came here because of you, spoke to me because of you. You're giving me all these revelations. You have transformed me. You have made me a public servant. And I go to my people and I talk to them. No one listens. How can I make people understand? And what God says in response is, who the hell do you think you are? You are a messenger. You're not the transformer of hearts. I am. You may go there, you may inspire, you may excite, but it's only God who can truly transform someone, change them from iron to gold. And which means that there comes a point that you can go and hear Muhammad talk every single day. And then you say, I want the thing that he has inside him. And if Muhammad was to exercise honesty, he would tell you, well, the thing you want that lives inside me, I didn't create it. It was given to me by above. And there comes a point where Muhammad tells this kid, if you want what I have, your cave life begins now. Up to now, you have been depending on me. Now that you are truly passionate, and it can be passionate today, and then you forget, I'm passionate next month. It doesn't work that way. It has to be all-consuming passion every goddamn day. And then your cave life begins. What do? There is no Muhammad. There are no communities. It's you, the darkness, and the chaos that lives inside you. And that's when you start knocking and asking. And you have to keep knocking and knocking and knocking and knocking until a door opens. And we have no idea how long the student needs to wait. But what's important is that the teacher has created the physical condition. He or she has always been present. The ears of the student has always been filled with his or her own, the teacher's voice and insights. And there comes a point where your voice is no longer yours. It's like you love Al Pacino, so you begin to talk like him. You begin to act like him. That is exactly the same way in the spiritual world. You have to read the dialogues of Plato over and over and over until your language becomes like Plato. And the only thing that now remains is, I have the language. I just need a Socrates to worship. Then you find the Socrates, and then he says, now you need a Diotima to worship. And then you find a Diotima, and she says, now you need a Dionysus to worship. Well, Jesus Christ, how many gods do I need to go through until I become wise? And that's how it is.